Welcome to another episode of the BioHub. So today I'm joined by Aaron Kantoff, co-founder and managing partner at Scion Life Sciences. Aaron helped build the therapeutics group at Appletree Partners from scratch, co-founding 11 companies along the way. After leaving Appletree, Aaron co-founded RayzeBio, which was acquired by BMS for $4.1 billion. Now at Scion, he's continuing to back and build bold biotech companies with long-term potential and a fresh approach to VC. We talk about the companies he's built, what he's learned from them, and why Scion is doubling down on science-first biotech in today's market. So good to have you, Aaron.
Thanks, Max, and that was a really kind introduction.
No, it's a pleasure. Honestly, really excited. So let's just step back to the start of your journey. How did you first get into life science investing, and what pulled you into biotech?
So I had a somewhat unorthodox path to biotech initially. So starting with childhood, both my parents were medical oncologists. My father was a specialist in prostate cancer. My mother specialized in breast cancer and also did some public health HIV work. So clinical medicine was part of the household. I visited the hospital at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, and also in the early 90s, did an internship visiting my mother's patients every weekend. And then fast forward to college, I knew, really did not love being in the hospital, did not love blood. I was interested from an early age in markets and finance and business, and chose to go to NYU Stern, and really wanted to be a hedge fund manager initially. And so I was a generalist up until 2010, at which point I had sort of the, my opinion was that being a generalist was overly saturated and people were specializing. And so when I was doing, one-off investing in biotech, I noticed that people were following the specialist in that market. And so I really wanted to play at the intersection of something I loved, science and medicine and business, and talked to a couple VCs at the time, one in Boston, Atlas Venture, and the managing partner of Appletree Partners. And that's when I started. I was investor employee number one at Appletree at the beginning of 2011.
That's awesome. And you had a pretty cool journey from then on. From what I could find, you've helped build 11 companies from scratch, including nearly over $10 billion in M&A exits. Some of the ones I found are like Chinook, Corvidia, obviously RayzeBio, and then a number of successful public companies like Akero, Centessa, Stoke. What do you attribute to having such a high hit rate, and what separates a durable company from one that could potentially fade?
The last part of that's a good question. I think, at the start, I think focus. I think while 11 seems like a lot, I like to say at Appletree and now at Scion, we're not a company formation factory. So my job on the formation side of the business is to find, on average, one really great idea a year. So that keeps the bar high naturally. And then second, we have a radical and rigorous focus on finding real medicines. Our view is that's the one sustainable currency in our industry, through ups and downs in the market. Revenue from a real drug is always going to be valuable, and that value floats in any market. And then lastly, I think being selective on partners, whether it's investment partners, syndication partners, or your operating management team. So a lot of what I do is help to put the pieces in play. But companies can drastically improve their probability of success by having the right managers in place on the team and the right board assembled.
Yeah, well, yeah, I can definitely see that. If we talk specifically about RayzeBio, which was a $4.1 billion exit to BMS, and that was just over 4 years from inception. which is pretty incredible. What made that company so successful?
I guess I failed to mention one other factor before, but I guess luck. There is some luck involved. That's not the only factor with Rayze, but look, there was foresight to go into what was an emerging but validated space, radiopharmaceuticals, which was like the backwater of oncology at the time. Most pharma were not interested. And most venture groups were not interested. So, we had a view, if we built it, they would come. Again, if you deliver on the promise of a real medicine, eventually strategics and investors will follow that linear path that is created when you tell a story of something that can be brought into the clinic and eventually have an impact on patients. That sells. Great investment partners that joined from day one: Ben Bio, Aaron Royston, and Gerald at Versant helped to lead the Series A. And then we brought in a great management team. So all those pieces that I just touched upon, Ken, Arvin, the co-founders, Deb and Aaron, there was the foundation was set. And we had a lead. We had a head start in a space that's become white hot, but at the time was not. And so that head start gave us the ability to create some dominance and become a leader in the field. And if you talk to anyone involved in that, it's not any singular piece of that story that got bought for $4.1 billion, but there was pipeline. There was a lead asset that had a real linear path to being commercial. There was manufacturing, which is an important piece of the puzzle in radiopharmaceuticals. And all those pieces combined, really help drive BMS to, step up and step into this.
Yeah, that's awesome. How early on did you know that this could be a little bit different to the rest? Did it feel different right from the start, or?
I mean, there's some that I think every journey is a roller coaster. There was moments where Akero, which is now over $4 billion company, felt like a rocket ship. Then it had setbacks, and there were moments where right out of the gate, Ken gets involved. Months later, we're doing a Series B, but there were setbacks for Rayze as well. We actually along the path did a down round, and then we had a successful IPO. I think just the overwhelming excitement about the field that came to fruition sort of somewhere between a year and 2 years after the founding of the company. I knew we had something in terms of if we didn't mess it up, we were going to create real value. And I think the management team did a great job of maintaining the head start and that lead. The brand, maintained a halo all the way through an IPO, the M&A that followed soon after. Wait, hold on.
Today's market's obviously a little bit tougher than what it was like 5 years ago. Do you think it could have been potentially different if it was founded today rather than when Rayze was founded during that, I suppose, a bit of a craze?
Yeah, I think Rayze benefited on one part of its continuum, which was that Series A. I think Series A seed rounds of preclinical companies are a little more difficult today, but there was genuine excitement, multiple term sheets, and a lot of groups that were interested. So I still think it would get done today. Ultimately the story sort of had the right pieces. So I think not something that is easy to replicate. Like when I tell when my LPs look at this, like there are very few exits of north of $3 billion in our industry, period. And then if you look at all of those exits over the 25-year history, just take that time period. There's, not even a handful that have gone from inception to sale north of $3 billion. in less than 5 years. So generally, like when you see a Karuna, a Cerevel, some of these exits, they take, a decade or longer usually.
Yeah, that's what makes it more incredible. It's amazing. You've always leaned towards the incubation model as well. What do you love about building from the ground up, and how does Scion in particular approach it?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll start with what I love about it. So, I love putting the pieces in play. I love seeing sort of the chemistry and the team and the excitement and enthusiasm from going from, inception to putting a strategy get together. I think, we play at the barbells of the investment spectrum. So we're either, forming the companies or investing in them when they're mature and public in a more passive way. If you're going early and you're a venture group, I think ball control is important. So what I love about it is, to some degree, controlling my own destiny. It's hard to put into practice, but having some control early days of whether the lights stay on or not, what the strategy is, indication selection, etc. I think that helps increase the probability of success, and there's learnings from each of these that you can impart on these new companies. And again, going back to focus, I think there are some venture groups and some individuals on 15, 20 boards at a time. Our goal is, on average, myself and Sam to each put one up a year. So I never feel like we're too bandwidth constrained to really help our companies go from point A to point B. So how do we go at it? I think we like to think of ourselves as proactive investors at Scion. I think one thing, going back to, Sam and I meeting at Apple Tree, and just becoming historians of the space, we really noticed that a lot of the space were reactive, and looking at 1,000 pitches at a year, reducing that down to sort of the top 10% that they do diligence on. The top 10% of those, they go into deep diligence, and generally by the time they get to that filter, they're already sort of leaning in and doing those deals. I don't think they go at it a lot of at that point. There was not a lot of, this is where we want to play, let's go survey that field. So we start with sort of a proactive approach. Every year we establish 2 or 3 hunting grounds. We dive into that with our fellowship program, our associates, our full team. And it's a collaborative, not a lone wolf strategy. So, and then within that, we have other focuses that came out of our 3 investment pillars. So our 3 investment pillars start with modality, or the technology made to use a drug. And each of these is trying to increase the probability of creating a real medicine, because that's, at the end of the day, our goal is to create a real medicine. And our hope one day is to put up, you mentioned earlier, a durable company. And that's one that can be self-sustaining, does not need to be taken out. A lot of times when you go to the finish line, pharma does buy you anyway. But our hope is, when we look back in 20, 25 years, that we've created one company that looks like a Vertex or an Alexion before they got bought, just a company with a commercial drug and a pipeline behind that. And, we have a long durated fund that allows us to stay longer with our companies in the traditional model.
I love that. Yeah. You look at those companies that have kind of got through, and I mean, you always look at that gap, right? Like small biotech to big pharma, and it's just like, wow, that's a journey.
Yeah. But, just finishing it up. So like, you focus on technologies that are proven. That for us, that means ones that have made it to the finish line, that are tried and true. You know how to manufacture them, so you're increasing your probability of getting into the clinic. And then that comes to our second pillar. We like to go after diseases where we understand the pathophysiology and biology well enough to cut to the core of that disease, and increase our probability of creating valuable early clinical data that lowers our risk of a late stage blow up. So a late stage blow up is, you squint at the phase 1b data, 2a data a certain way, and you convince yourself of going and running that definitive registrational phase 3 trial. And that becomes an important binary bet that you don't want to lose on. So you want to de-risk it with understanding the biology and really valuable early clinical data. And then our third pillar goes to the durability factor, which is from inception, we really think M&A is one of two exits, and we don't want to cut off the other exit, which is going public and creating a revenue stream for a company. And so from inception, we think through late stage clinical and commercial viability as a biotech company. So that precludes us, for example, from going into obesity. That is somewhat blasphemy in right now in sort of traditional VC. There are some funds that are all in, and I can understand that. It is the biggest market we've ever seen. Multiple pharma groups have franchises. There are going to be a lot of winners through M&A. But our view fundamentally is that we want to be able to take it the distance and not be concerned about M&A being our path to success. And so by having both M&A and sort of a tractable late stage plan, we think we're increasing our late stage probability of success as well.
Well, yeah, I love that way of thinking. You guys at Scion, you raised what, $310 million in your first round. What inspired you to launch the firm?
I think on the heels of the success that Sam and I had together at Appletree, we built a portfolio of 7 companies that together with the managing partner there. We really wanted to run it back together on a platform that was more durable. Without going into details, the part of the reason I left in 2019 was all of Appletree was funded by a single LP who was initially from Russia. So there was like some existential risk to that being an issue politically. Having all your eggs in one basket, especially on the heels of the success that we had, just felt like a risky proposition. So building a firm that took sort of the best of some of our practices built up at Appletree, with a slightly more diversified investor base who had the same interest in staying long and building mature value, and allowing ourselves to build a culture that fostered a belief in our philosophy, in those 3 pillars. That's what excited us about building Scion.
Yeah. And we talked about the market as well, didn't we? Like a little bit. How is your strategy being shaped in this current market?
Yeah, I think I guess the only difference is the only difference is from what we previously did is we've put a somewhat arbitrary stop on how far we'll go. We're not afraid to fund things alone from inception. So we will seed things, we'll keep things in stealth, and they'll pop up years after inception. But we have in this market, and for a variety of reasons, realized that it's at some point you need to bring other investors to the table to really proceed down the path of creating a real company and a real medicine. So we now look at $30 million as sort of our high water mark of how long we will fund alone in a single company. I think that's sort of the main difference. I think we've always funded to critical milestones, but it's never been more important to do that. I think you can't be left without capital fundraising in certain periods. So I call it the valley of death. I think a lot of companies look to get funding, in between, having a development candidate in IND. And that works if you're sort of at the back end of that spectrum. Timeline to the clinic is there. And that works if fundamentally creating the development candidate was, a high value proposition, but that's a timely and costly process that, people have to be conjoined and interested in. And in this market, it's a slightly harder period. So we like to make sure our companies are funded to really key nodes of value creation.
Do you get more involved as well earlier in the companies, like in terms of like how they spend their cash and things like that?
Yeah, I think there's been sort of natural inflation of costs, and there has been sort of undisciplined approaches that became sort of the norm during the high abundance of capital time period, like I said, 2018, 19 to 2021. I think we like to find managers that are aligned with us on not just throwing $100 million Series A's on the table. We also like to ask the question of our management teams, are we doing this at the most efficient cost basis possible? So we're definitely conscious of not drip feeding, but also looking to be efficient in terms of personnel and R&D spend, and making sure that what became industry norm during that period, 2019 to 2021, is not sort of embedded in our thinking today at all.
Yeah. And that just highlights how important the right people are in these ventures as well. If you're looking, I imagine this is something you think about, like if you're looking at bringing other investors in, they're obviously looking at the management team you've brought in as well.
Yeah, that's right. I think the same factors that go in any industry are even more important in biotech. You really have to fundamentally believe that the team can bring you to the promised land, and the investor base around the table has the wherewithal to bring this to sort of critical value inflection points.
Yeah. What are you most excited about right now at Scion? What's to come?
Yeah, I think for us, conditional sort of or targeted delivery on an organ by organ basis. So we're biologics, large molecule heavy, and then we are constantly asking the question, if we could drive sort of cell specificity or tissue specificity, where would we go and what are the unmet needs in a given tissue? So yeah, right now, for instance, we have a genetic cardiology company. We have a genetic benign hematology company, and we have a really more targeted approach to depleting T cells. So in each case, sort of on the macro theme of getting rid of or getting to the cells or tissue of interest in a targeted way after sort of decades of systemic therapies. I think we've made enough progress, especially in oncology, via ADCs, radiotherapy, that we have the modalities and the tools to get where we need to get to, and leveraging all that for unmet needs outside of oncology is really how we think about where to play over the next decade and what we're most excited about.
Yeah, I can't wait to see it play out. I think it's going to be pretty exciting. Finally, last question, which is a question we ask each of our guests. If you could have dinner with any scientist or innovator, past or present, who would it be and why?
Yeah, so I guess I have a two-part answer. So first, I would love to have a quick moment with Marie Curie and tell her that sort of all her work in innovative space around radioisotopes has led to real medicines that are making breakthroughs in cancer sort of nearly 100 years later. And then, second, as someone that tries to systematically approach new innovation, I'd love to sit down with some of the greatest innovators of all time, like Leonardo da Vinci or Tesla. These guys were able to just pump out so much innovation. And if there's any method to their madness in terms of creating new things, I'd love to pick their brains for a dinner.
Yeah, same. Pleasure to have you on, Aaron. It was amazing to hear the story.
Thanks, Max. It was a pleasure.
And please, everyone, like and subscribe to the BioHub. And thanks again, Aaron.
Thanks, Max. Thanks, everyone.